Hi there, I recently bought this Holbein Acrylic Gouache primary colour mixing set whilst I was in Japan, and I thought I would do a review of it today. First we'll do some colour mixing and some swatches, and then I will do a couple of small paintings with it, and throughout it all I'll give you my reviews, but it is all timestamped down below if you do want to jump to any particular part. The box has a cool little mixing guide on the back, and I thought the colours were actually printed quite accurately. It also does show all the 5 different colours that there are. So we've got primary magenta, primary yellow, primary cyan, primary black and primary white, and then it shows what series they're in, their permanency rating, and also the pigments that are in them. And we'll talk about that more when we do the swatches. Now, I have never used these before. I've never used acrylic gouache before, so whilst I hadn't actually opened the tubes, I had opened this box before, so I'm assuming these were how they were laid out in it. I just put them back in it, but let's have a little bit of a look at the tubes as well. All the tubes in this set are 20 mils, and when you open them there isn't any seal or anything that you need to break, so it is just straight to the paint. The back of the tubes show the permanency rating, and I'm assuming that's out of 4 because this little line is broken up into 4 spots. It shows the series and then also the pigments that are in each tube. On the front you have the Monsal colour system information, the name of the paint, and then also the number of the paint based on the entire Holbein Acrylic Gouache set. I'll be using this ceramic dish that I bought in an op shop to mix all the colours on, and then I'm just using a flat brush, any flat brush. This is a cheapie, I have no clue where I got it from. And for the swatches for the paper, I'm using my Handbook Journal Co. Travelogue watercolour journal, which is cold pressed watercolour paper. I don't think that it's 100% cotton, which is what I generally prefer, but I do really love using this watercolour book for any wet media, and I find the surface is really good, so that's what I decided to go with for these swatches. The first thing I noticed when I opened these paints was they were super fluid coming out of the tube, nothing like watercolour or gouache, so I just recommend being mindful, and I just only added small amounts to my palette at a time so it didn't dry out. I thought it was really interesting that the primary yellow was actually made up of 2 pigments, PY3 and PY74. These are both cool greenish yellows, so they do lean on the cool side. And this one also only had a permanency rating of 2 out of 4, where all of the others had a permanency rating of 3 out of 4. With it being a colour mixing set, I am surprised that it is a 2 pigment colour, because normally you want to have single pigment colours to create the cleanest mix as possible. The primary cyan is a single pigment colour, and that is made up of PB15, which is our phthalo cyanine blue. This is a cool blue, so PB15 is a very broad pigment, or a very, can't think of the right word. It can be warm or cool. A lot of colours are made up using PB15, and so this one is quite cool. So at the moment we have 2 cool colours in our primary mixing set. The primary cyan also has a 3 out of 4 light fastness rating. I did also add between the yellow and the blue swatches a black line across my swatches, just using a fine liner, and that was just so I could see kind of opacity with a one stroke of trying to not mix any water really at all, or as little water as possible, into the paint to see how opaque I can get it with one stroke. And then with these swatches, what else I did was I tried to do quite an opaque swatch at the top, and then I really watered it down to kind of see how much they could water down. They laid down pretty smooth when I watered them down, but they were a bit streaky when I tried to get a straight up opaque kind of swatch, so I think these would definitely be the kind of paint that you might need to do a few layers of to build up that colour. The primary magenta is a single pigment colour, and it is made up of the pigment PR122, which is often known as quinacridone magenta, so this one is a cool red, and it has a permanency rating of 3 out of 4. So with all of the 3 primary colours being cool colours, I would say this is a cool mixing set. I would always personally prefer to have 6 colours in a mixing set, so you've got a warm and a cool of each primary colour. That said though, I think whether a warm or cool primary set suits you better depends on the subject that you want to paint and what really interests you, and we can talk about that more when we do the colour wheel. So the primary white is made up of the pigment PW6, and one thing that I thought was really interesting about this was when I bought all these paints when I was in Japan, I also bought a 40ml tube of the titanium white because typically I use white a lot for mixing colours. And the titanium white is also made of the same pigment, except it's got a 4 out of 4 permanency rating, whereas the primary white only has a 3 out of 4. Now, I couldn't find any other differences, so I'm not sure where this difference, like why one is more permanent than the other, but I thought that was worth noting, that if you were buying these individually, trying to kind of see what the differences are. I know that they also have a Chinese white, which I think is often a little less bright white than others, but that's just something to consider if you were to get paints individually rather than in a set. Primary black is made of the pigment PBK7 and has a permanency rating of 3 out of 4. Now, from what I could see, there are 3 other blacks that are available in the Holbein Acrylic Gouache set, and they are all made up of different pigments. Actually, no, 2 are made up of the same pigment, PBK1, and then 1 is made up of PBK6. And that one is lamp black. Now, that one has a 4 out of 4 permanency rating, where the other 2 have a 2 out of 4 permanency rating. So this one's kind of smack bang in the middle. I don't have the other one, so I can't really do a swatch comparison. This definitely won't be the prettiest colour wheel you've ever seen, so I'm sorry for that. It's okay. I was going to use my Cricut to cut out a bit of a stencil to make a really nice looking one, and then I decided that was way too much effort and this would do. If I really wanted to do this properly, I would be making sure that the ratio of each colour is like a good 50-50 mix, and then so I'd have the magenta and the cyan, and then being a 50-50 mix and doing that colour in the middle. And then with that colour, I'd be mixing, I think, that 50-50 with either magenta or cyan, and then that would go on the side closest to the primary colour that I'd mix that with. But that is not how I did it, and we just eyeballed it, and it turned out fine. So with cool colours, you'll get some really lovely purple mixes and some really vibrant purples. So with this being a cool mixing palette, it's awesome to get those really vibrant purples. It will also give you super vibrant greens, so really bright ones. And that's amazing, it's awesome. As I said before, it depends what you want to use a mixing palette for. So some people, if they're wanting to create a lot of like nature scenes and landscapes, depending again on the colours they want, if you're doing a Studio Ghibli kind of thing, you might really want those vibrancies. But if you're wanting to go for a more kind of realistic kind of palette, some people might prefer a warmer palette because it gives more muted kind of mixes for the greens especially, and like the blues and purples. But as I said, I prefer to have all 6, so 3 warms and 3 cools for that reason, that allows that versatility to kind of make what you want depending on what it is that you're wanting to paint. And the other thing to note with that as well is so many paintings don't just have a warm palette or don't just have a cool palette. A lot of the time it is a mix of warm and cool colours to really kind of create that kind of like dynamic colour story within a painting. The green mixes that I got from this are absolutely gorgeous. I love them. They are so like sunlit leaves, like that really light kind of limey green, and then it went down to like a really gorgeous kind of like wet rainforest kind of colour. So I think these colours would be like absolutely gorgeous to be painting some landscapes with. And with that, I'm like thinking kind of that Studio Ghibli kind of vibe. Now the oranges that got mixed from the magenta and the yellow were lovely. You'd get brighter oranges if you had 2 warm colours being mixed, and that's why I always feel like you kind of miss out on the cool palette is you don't have a bright red, you've got more of that pinky magenta. So that is always something to take note of. I have split this part up, but I also just did a few mixes of each of the primary colours with the white, and then each of the primary colours with the black. The black definitely did overpower the colours really easily, which is to be expected. And then I also did a little kind of mix up of just the black and the white, because there's obviously like different warmth and coolnesses and tones of grey. So just to see kind of what grey you can get from just mixing those together. I was gonna cut out this part right here of me struggling to mix any sort of kind of skin base on my palette to start with, but I thought I'd keep it in to be a bit more authentic. I did speed up this clip here by like 400% though, because I spent ages mixing different kind of skin bases. I found this really hard. I'm not sure why, I think normally when I do mix a skin base with watercolors, I often use like a yellow ochre, so more of an earth toned, warmer yellow color. But now looking back at all of the swatches that I did, there's some decent ones in there. There's probably some unrealistic ones as well, but I think it's more so that I'm just not used to using only cool colors to mix a skin tone base. And I tried to kind of give as much variety, well, not as much, but quite a bit of variety there of different bases. I think if I were to make an alteration to this palette and only have it be the 5 colors, I'd probably want to have a burnt umber or like a burnt sienna instead of the black personally, just because that would make, for me, mixing skin tone bases a bit easier. I do feel like a lot of the deeper shades that I mixed were kind of ashy when they came out, but I'm not sure if it's just part of the medium being a matte medium or not, and whether the other ones also look ashy, but just something I noted. I also did a quick glaze test as well, so I laid down a layer of each of the blue and yellow and let them dry. And then with the other respective colour, I did a really light wash over the top just to see how much that would tint the layer underneath. This is something you can't really do with normal gouache without easily kind of re-wetting the layer underneath. Now I've got 2 really quick time lapses of 2 very different kind of styles of paintings. So the first one was this eye. I think my first issue here was that I went so small with the eye, and the second issue was I just didn't know what I was doing. I have said before, like when painting with gouache or with anything, like I definitely go through an ugly phase to my paintings, and this one seemed to go on forever. Looking back at the time lapse, I actually think towards the end it looked better than I thought it did after kind of sitting there and stressing over it for a while. But the amount of times that I reworked different areas, I was definitely approaching this like I would with regular gouache, so I'm not sure kind of how much I need to be able to adapt my style when using gouache like this. The paints dried so fast on my palette. Now I'm not sure how the temperature or kind of where I live affects that so much, but I would be really curious to see how these work with a stay wet palette. And then I also kind of questioned how worth it is for the cost of these as compared to possibly like mixing a matte medium with acrylics instead of using acrylic gouache. I'll often mix a retarder with my acrylic paint so it dries a bit slower and gives me some more working time. So I don't know if that's an option with acrylic gouache, but my understanding is people normally purchase them because they like the matte effect. So I would be curious to see if mixing a matte medium with an acrylic paint would give off the same kind of finish as acrylic gouache. I feel like once I started painting the iris in a bit more is when things started to look a little bit better. It also wasn't until after the fact, really watching this back, that I realised I was probably looking at this like from 20 or 30 centimetres away. It's really easy to be super critical up close and see all the issues with it, but when you do step back, all those strokes and everything do merge together a bit more and it does look a little more coherent as a painting. I just couldn't get myself happy with the overall result of this, so I did end up going in with coloured pencils, which kind of ruins the only using primary colours aspect of this whole thing, but the surface was actually really kind of resistant and waxy for me to use pencils on, and so I wasn't expecting that, so I thought that was just something worth noting as well. For this second painting, I wanted to do something that was a little less blendy and a little more layery. So I did a little painting of a cat, and I used my cat as inspiration. My cat's name's Blue, and that's why, as you'll see, I did the fur blue, and then I did like where the white fur is supposed to be. I used the magenta for that part. It probably would have looked better if I did it the other way around, because I feel like the blue would kind of suggest more of like a cool area and like a shadow area. But this is how I did it. I don't mind how this turned out. It was definitely a completely different style and way of using the paint than it was when I did paint the eye. I'm going to take the next minute or so to kind of give my thoughts on this set. And I think the first thing to start off with is acrylic gouache. Now, this definitely wouldn't be a medium for everyone. I'm not sure, honestly, how I really feel about using it. I think I need to use it more. Since I did like all these tests here, filmed this like a week or so ago, and I've only used it once since, and that was to do a background for a gouache painting where I didn't want the gouache to reactivate the background layer. So I used acrylic gouache, which gave it the same finish. I feel like for me, this is a great mixed media paint to have, kind of when using regular gouache or maybe watercolor, I'm not sure. I do have a heap of colors that I bought, so I am going to have to kind of use them for something. I'll figure that out, and who knows, maybe I might find a use for this that I really enjoy. So if you are certain that you are wanting to give acrylic gouache a go, I think this could be a great set to use. I think though, if you do have a really specific art style and you already have kind of a color story that is pretty thematic throughout your art, then you're probably better off buying colors that are more specific to that. But if you're just wanting to give it a go and try it out, absolutely, I reckon 5 paints is a really good place to start to see if you like it, so you're not over investing in buying a heap of paints and then kind of figuring out if you like it from there, kind of like I did. If you got this far, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope this video was helpful or useful to you in some way. If you do want to, feel free to subscribe. I'm trying to get videos out about twice a month at the moment, and all my socials are down below. And if you did find this video helpful, please feel free to give it a thumbs up, and I hope you have an amazing day.